serious.
Oh, Lord help me.
So, welcome everyone to Beyond Us, the podcast where we explore the people behind the titles and discover the impact they have on the world beyond what meets the eye. Today, I'm joined by Alex Freedman, Executive Director of the Community Radio Fund of Canada. And throughout his career, Alex has worked as an investigative journalist, a producer, a newsrooms leader, an advisor to national organizations, including the Assembly of First Nations. His work has consistently focused on informing communities, supporting local voices, and strengthening the role of media in society. Alex, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you here on Beyond Us.
I'm very excited about this station. So often we do these things and we focus on one thing, or we focus on local media, or we focus on, international conflict or whatnot. I love the idea of just kind of exploring a little bit more. So I'm excited.
We're excited to get to know you,
Good.
Alex. Okay, to start.
Oh boy. All right.
To start, we would love to know how it all started. When did you first realize that helping people and telling their stories was something that you wanted to dedicate your life to?
Well, I come from, my parents were kind of hippies.
Oh.
So my father was a faculty member at the University of Western Ontario, an anthropologist. My mother is an immigrant from Eastern Europe. My grandmother was from Russia. My mother was born in Yugoslavia.
Ooh.
My mom is also a Quaker. And so public service has been kind of part of my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah.
All your life then.
All my life. I remember being 3 years old, sitting on the picket line in support of personal care workers and long-term care workers. I remember being part of the creation of a food co-op in London, Ontario.
Wow.
Where we made sure that food was accessible for everybody, and fresh food and natural food. So a huge amount of my life with my parents has been, and my upbringing was about, recognizing that our happiness and our success as individuals comes through what the success of our community,
Yes.
and therefore our role is primarily about building that community. So those were my formative years. That's how I came to be in this world. And so that then, I think, informed everything else I did. I'm an active volunteer, and when I started in radio, I went to Concordia. That's my alma mater. And I was at there's two campuses, one's on the west side of town. And I had this apartment, and I was a mature student when I got there. And I got into this apartment, and I thought, this is great. And I walked out of the apartment. Right across the street was a radio station called CFLI, and this was one of the two radio stations in Concordia. And I thought, oh, yeah.
Why not?
Right? How cool. And so I got a 10 o'clock show called Night Flights. And we used to do all sorts of crazy stuff, and we'd have dance parties in the studio, and it was so much fun. But immediately I knew I wanted to volunteer for this radio station in some way or another. And is sometimes the case in student radio, within about a year, somebody came to me and said, the entire executive just resigned. Want to be station manager?
Yes.
Right, exactly. So next thing you know, I'm station manager of Radio Concordia. Because there were two campuses at Concordia, there were two radio stations. And I sort of said, well, this is crazy. Why are we splitting the student funding between two when it's radio?
Yes.
We may have a station in one place, but the broadcast is universal. So we merged the two stations, and from there, a station called CJLO was born. But again, to your question, it's all about just arriving in a place and thinking, how can I volunteer? How can I be part of the solution?
Was there a specific experience, part of the experience, a moment where it convinced you, this is what I want. It's because of this specifically, this feeling, that I want to keep going with this?
I had a professor, international relations. His name was Dr. Adalbert Lallier. And Dr. Lallier, I was originally in political science, and he said, And we used to get into fights at the beginning of every class about world politics. Oh, no, good fights, like interesting fights. And then at one point he says to me, okay, Alex, we're going to have to let the other students talk. Yeah. So why don't you come to my office before class and we'll talk. And so I would do this every class. I would go in a half hour to an hour before class, and I would have my time with Dr. Lallier. And and he would ask me, he says, why are you in political science? And I said, because I want to make a difference in this world. And through politics, I think I can do that. And he said to me, how do you think politicians get their message to the world? How do you think what they do resonates with those people who elect them, with the people who need it most? He says, through the media. He says, you love to talk. You love to argue. You love to be part of the conversation. And it was like a light bulb moment. And that afternoon, I walked over to the journalism department at Concordia, and I met with the secretary, and she signed me up. And from that moment on, like I just knew it. And then I was lucky to work for the CBC, and we can talk about some of the bigger stories we did at the CBC if you're interested. But there was one story that I'll never forget, and it wasn't the international correspondent work, and it wasn't the investigative work. It was a summer camp. It was a summer camp for kids who came from underprivileged families, who didn't have a lot of money, who were largely immigrant. And they were living in parts of Montreal, and they never got out of Montreal during the summer. And so this summer camp was created for these kids. Yeah. So we did. I get this phone call from the camp leader, and she says, we're running really low on money, and we may have to shut this program down. So I said, I've got a free few minutes this afternoon after work. I'm going to come down and do some interviews. So I did. I interviewed her. I interviewed some of the kids. This is all in my own free time. The next day I went to work, and I said to my assignment editor, I said, I've got a really good story. It's all on tape. Give me a moment. I'll have it up for noon. And he said, okay, do it quick because I need you to go cover something else after noon. So I did it fast. It aired. And 2 days later, she called me up, and she said, an anonymous donor just called us, and he's giving us $50,000. So we're going to stay open for the next 5 years.
It was saved.
And we can keep bringing in and subsidizing the cost for these kids so that they can have access to a little time in the Laurentians on a canoe and see that side of life too. And I'm tearing up as I tell this story. God, the ability to have that kind of impact, the ability to use a little tape recorder and a curiosity to have that kind of impact, wow, I will never forget that story. And from that day on, that was one of the sort of defining moments in my life that just, I knew I was in the right place when I was doing it.
That is very interesting, Alex, because nowadays we have this conversation, right? This debate that it's politics that create this direct, rapid change when it comes to this problematics. But we don't talk much about media and the actual impact that it has. And that is actually something I want to connect to another question I have for you. Beyond ratings and audiences or funding numbers, how do you measure whether you've made a meaningful impact?
Oh, it's a very good question, and I'll tell you, one of the things we ask ourselves at public broadcasting and otherwise is, why does this matter? Like, I measure impact in engagement, right? And not about social media clicks, but I mean, when a radio station, one of the stations that we work with, has a funding drive and gets to earn more than their target, the community is invested in them. When a journalist does a story and impacts a decision at the municipal council level, when you create change, when you make change for the better as a journalist, that is worth 10 times more than any sort of online click or subscription number. And part of the problem in media right now is we measure success for media through listenership numbers. We don't have a way right now of quantifying impact. And, I always say that we have to find a way of teaching the world that when there is an emergency, when there's a hurricane in Nova Scotia, and that radio station stays on air for 72 hours, live broadcasting through the whole thing, updating where power is on, where power is off, where the volunteers have sandwiches that you can go get if you can't turn your oven on, you need to feed your kids, where you can go and help out. What are the neighborhoods that need support right now? Like that's impact. That is difference. That is helping people with their lives. And for me, that is the measure of success in community broadcasting, and it should also be the measure of success in commercial and public broadcasting too. We need to stop trying to quantify this and recognize that there is a role in terms of making a community better. And I know I'm sounding really airy-fairy here, but I feel strongly that impact is about change. Impact is about making a difference.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And well, I'm curious now to know, what do you think about all of these people that believe that, because we're talking about broadcasting, right?
Yeah.
The traditional type of broadcasting, because I'm talking mostly because of the people my age, we're Gen Zs.
Yep.
Many of us do not listen or do not consume any sort of traditional media.
Okay.
Many of us do not even believe in it. We don't think it's legitimate either. How can we change that perspective so people can understand how important this is? Leave our differences behind, and for these traditional medias to focus on other quantitative ways of making the information and the engagement valuable.
So first of all, I would challenge a part of your question.
Okay.
Among the top 10 podcasts, sort of globally,
Yes.
you have This American Life.
Yes.
You have Radio Lab. These are radio shows. These are on PRX. These are first and foremost, always have been created by Chicago Public Radio or New York Public Radio.
Yes.
So you may not think you're engaging with traditional radio because you're hearing it as a podcast.
But you are.
But it is, exactly. So to the question, as radio stations,
Yes.
we need to stop thinking about ourselves as radio stations and thinking about ourselves as audio content producers, because we as a society love audio content. There's a reason Audible is such a popular site. There's a reason podcasting is a thing, because we like to hear the stories, because audio content touches us in a vastly different way than YouTube or video content. Audio content challenges us to create the image of what's happening in our own mind. And great audio content, be it on AM, FM, be it on podcast, be it on stream, be it on digital radio, be it on whatever the medium upon which the content is broadcast, is magical because it is audio, right? I don't know if you know this story, and the older listeners will know this. Orson Welles wrote a thing called War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
It was a radio play. It was about aliens invading.
Okay.
When he broadcast that for the first time, it was so real. And I don't know for a fact that this is true, but I'm told that people were jumping out of their windows in fear because they thought aliens were attacking. Howard Stern is a very famous New York broadcaster who is very much a shock jock. He wanted to be the king of all media. And so he put cameras in his studio, and it almost killed him. Because instead of imagining him, and he used to have people of smaller stature, and he used to have them running around the studio, and he would tease them and all this sort of. There was this thing that you could imagine in your head that was far beyond what was actually happening in the studio. And when you saw what was happening in the studio, the mystique disappeared. And trying to be the king of all media almost destroyed his career. So, to your question, audio content is a beautiful thing. How you deliver the audio content is not what's important. The quality of the content itself is what's important, and that transcends generations. If I hear this on AM/FM, our conversation,
Yes.
or if I hear it on my podcast app,
Yes.
the conversation is still great. And if we do our job right,
Yes.
it's engaging enough for audiences anywhere of any age, as long as you're curious. So we need to stop, and this is something we can go on and on about in society, but we tend to build boxes around things.
Yeah,
we
that
like
is
to
very
classify women's issues. We like to classify LGBTQ2S+
to put a label
issues.
on everything.
Right. The moment we realize these are human issues, we make a difference. The moment we realize audio is great, and we stop trying to think of, well, my kids listen to podcasting, radio is dead. No, it's just a different way of engaging with a great thought.
And it's still audio.
Yes, yes. And so to answer your question, I know I've taken a circuitous route to get there.
No, it's very interesting.
But
we love it.
Right? This is how you will engage with these audiences, one way or another. The sound has to be good. The quality of the conversation, the research the host puts into it has to be good.
To make it engaging.
And if you're there, it doesn't matter how you're hearing it.
So you can convince people that things are important by the quality of the content that you're doing.
Absolutely. Now you need to be on a variety of different platforms with that content, and you need to be marketing that content.
Yes.
I will also tell you, and this may surprise you, in terms of, and this is, I'm going to say, I think it's Radio Connects that does this data research. The number one method upon which Canadians get audio content is still AM/FM at 49%.
Wow.
The next highest ranked audio content provider is YouTube at 19%. So you may think everybody is doing the streamers. But in fact, there's a huge segment of our population that are still on AM/FM. Only 24% of Indigenous communities in Canada even have broadband. AM/FM in a country as big and wide as Canada will, for a very long time, still play a big role.
So it's a lie what they say that radio is dying.
It's a misperception.
Okay.
Right? I mean, radio needs to continue to carve out its niche. Radio needs to continue to evolve. I have these conversations with our member stations all the time. We're not dying, but there are challenges.
Transforming.
Exactly.
Okay, Alex. I was very happy with this conversation.
This is fun.
It's important to talk about these things.
Yes.
Because people avoid this kind of debates.
Right.
They do avoid them.
Okay, so here's another thought for you on that question.
Okay.
And move me along if we're running out of time, 'cause I'll talk forever. We have right now a real problem that is caused by social media, and that's disinformation, misinformation, both.
Yes. Yes.
There are two ways of solving this. The government just a couple of days ago, and I hope I'm not screwing things up by time referencing, just put out an Online Harms Act, which is meant to penalize those people who put out disinformation online. The problem is it's a little bit like holding a handful of sand.
Yeah,
Once the
it's
sand
impossible.
gets out,
Yeah.
it's out.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. In my opinion, the actual solution is flooding the playing field with legitimate voices. Flooding the playing field with people and broadcasters in any capacity that can be trusted. So radio, and particularly local radio, fulfills two things that the internet will never, ever be able to keep up with. Well, not in the next little while. Live,
Yes.
local. your community you will never hear about on Spotify. Your little brother's softball game you will never hear about on Spotify. The local arts festival that is highlighting and spotlighting artists from your community, you'll never hear about on Spotify.
We're so connected to the world that we forget where we are.
But that's still important. And a lot of people, and particularly this, I'm speaking now to those who don't live in Ottawa, but Renfrew or Pontiac or Maniwaki or one of these communities that is not served by commercial and public radio stations, still rely on that connection. And it's still critical to community building.
It is. Alex, going back to your story.
Okay.
Going back to your story and connecting a little bit what you're saying here. I think something is very important, and that connectivity that you're talking about, the community.
Yeah.
I have heard that you've had many experiences in CBC precisely about connecting these communities in not only Canada, but only parts of the other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Would you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Sure. There's this wonderful station when we were in the Congo, in the DRC, because there's a Congo and there's a Democratic Republic. This is the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Congo is a unique place. If it were to control all of its own natural resources, it would be the third wealthiest nation on the planet. Today, I don't know what the number is, but it's not good. They have huge problems with foreign incursion. Canadian companies make a huge amount of money off of those minerals and often buy them from warlords. So we did a lot of work in the Congo about a series of reports that had come out in the early 2000s.
Yes.
One was called The Exploitation of Wealth and Natural Resources from the DRC. So while we were down there, I got to do some interviews and got to explore a radio station called Radio Okapi. Radio Okapi is funded by the United Nations, or in the Congo it's called MONUC.
MONUC. Okay.
Mission de l'Organisation des Nations Unies du Congo, MONUC. This is a radio station that broadcasts all over the country. Mm-hmm. And when there is a ceasefire,
yes,
there's no television in the jungle.
They have no way of communicating.
There's no newspaper. So Radio Okapi would just go to these communities and bring radios and bring batteries and say, here you go. If you're ever wondering, turn it on. We'll be telling you the story. Radio Okapi, to this day, I believe, continues to be a major force. And we've heard a lot about the Congo right now and the Ebola crisis. Radio Okapi is the place where people get their news. And that kind of connection in the Congo, I mean, it's incredible, right? I was in the Philippines, and we did work with local broadcasters in the Philippines because Canadian immigration consultants, when they're bringing in a Filipino worker, are supposed to pay the cost of that worker's voyage to Canada. That's the way it works. We don't need to penalize the immigrant.
Yeah.
Huh? What we found was that those consultants in Manila were charging thousands, in some cases tens of thousands of dollars to the workers to connect them.
No way.
Right? So we worked with local media there to tell those stories. That shut down a handful, and there's many, many more. I mean, we didn't solve the problem. But there are at least 5 crooked counselors who are not doing that work anymore.
It helped.
I think we made a difference. Small, but a difference. And every drop in that bucket is another drop. So those are some of the, I hope that sort of answers the question. Those are some of the foreign media experiences. But, this exists everywhere.
Yes.
There are people that need a voice everywhere. And if we can find a way to give them a microphone like you and I have right now, then they can experience the privilege that we know.
It's important to see that we're able to make that difference. I know that it didn't fix all the problem, but it did fix something.
Some.
Now, imagine if everyone gave a little bit of their part.
I got shivers. I mean, really, that's where we need to get to. We need to stop tearing each other down. If every single one of those internet trolls, instead of insulting somebody, helped them,
Try to understand them.
listened to them, what kind of world would we live in? Wouldn't that be a beautiful place?
It would be.
So we have a choice, right? Everybody has a choice. Do I build or do I destroy? And I'll tell you this too. I think the trolls are in the vast minority, but the rest of us are afraid to speak up.
Why do you think it's that?
Oh, because we're afraid. We don't want to be beaten down by those trolls. The trolls are louder. This was a lesson that was really developed in the anti-abortion movement. The lesson was you don't have to be right. You just have to say it louder and more often. The trolls say it louder and more often. So those of us who believe in building, who believe in our neighbors, who want to do the right thing, well, we can stick our neck out and get slapped pretty hard because it's going to happen, believe me when I say. And so it's hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, those of us who believe in the right thing, and I'm going to say the right is a big umbrella here, not right politically, but the appropriate.
Yeah.
Life is easier if you don't stick your neck out. It just is. And I know this to be true because my neck has been lashed on many occasions. My family has been threatened. My world has been jeopardized because I'm going to speak up. I've changed jobs because I want to protect my family from that. But I've always found a way, in my own way, to speak up. And that'll never stop. My poor kids. Dad, shut up.
Again?
Yeah.
But then I feel like still all the work you've done is gonna stay for the future, for future generations as an inspiration. Yeah. Alex, I am inspired by you, by the way.
Well,
I really admire
you.
Thank you.
No, I mean, like, understand that you're asking the questions. You're seeking this conversation. We need you. I've done my part. I'll continue to do my part. The women on this program are leaders in your own right. The conversations you're going to inspire through this podcast are part of the future. In Indigenous culture, there's a concept about 7 generations. We have to be mindful and respectful of the 7 generations who preceded us. Our ancestors, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they sacrificed for us. And now it's our responsibility to live our life mindful of the next 7
generations. Wow. That is something we really need to think about because we normally think only about what we're living and just what's around us and nothing else. Maybe, but this is something you came up with by your experiences with the First Nations and all the beautiful experiences that journalism has brought into your life. Is there any belief that you hold today that maybe your younger self would have disagreed with?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it gets to my younger self was ready to put his head through a wall to make a difference. I'm not there anymore. I believe that there is a time to hold your tongue. Not to avoid making a difference, to be clear.
But to be safe, maybe?
To listen.
Okay.
To hear what the other people have to say. And sometimes that's MAGA. Sometimes that's a person who holds beliefs that are diametrically opposed to yours. Today, I know that I have to listen to everybody. My opinion has to be formed based on an understanding of the opinions that I don't hold, because there are people that do. And I like to believe that even those people are doing what they think is best for themselves and for their families and for their communities. We may see that differently. We do see that differently. So today I know that I have to listen, that I have to learn from them too. I have to watch every now and again Fox, because I may not hold the opinion, but my neighbors do. Don't have to argue in favor of that. But it is my responsibility as a contributor to hear. Right? And there's a difference, by the way, between listening and hearing. I didn't know that when I was a kid. I was smarter than everybody else. I was righter than everybody else. And I was really happy to tell them about that. I'm still a very passionate man. But there's a bit of humility that has come in after 51 years.
That much time?
Yeah, don't look at me like that. Don't you?
I'm just joking here. I'm just joking here.
I know. But yeah, that's a lesson.
It really is, because mostly when you get into a conversation with someone, it's about winning, right? Who's right, who's wrong. But what about understanding where they come from?
And here's the problem. If you come at that conversation with, I'm going to convince you.
Yes.
You won't. You will build a wall. 99.99999% of the time, if you come in and say, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. And politicians don't get this.
They love that.
They want to do that because they want to be seen. It's a performative thing. You want to change somebody's mind? Hear them. And then find the points of commonality. And then orient the conversation, which is not one way.
Yes.
Around those points of commonality. Because most of us want to make sure our kids have a good world to live in. How we get there is where we might diverge.
Alex, now that you're talking about the future, and I know that you also have kids, how exactly would you like to be remembered for? Or what kind of teaching would you like to leave to the world and the future generations in media?
I want to be remembered as a good dad. That's all I care about. All of the rest of this stuff will come and go. Orders of Canada, journalism awards, all of this stuff will sit on a shelf, and 10 years from now won't make a difference. 2 young women who contribute in their own way, who know they were loved. That's my legacy. That's all. There's no money that will make that different. Who are they? How did they feel when they were growing up? And how did that help them keep going and making a difference in their own right, in any way they choose?
Perhaps the biggest difference we can make as humans is trying to do our best with what's close to us, right?
And you don't have to have kids. I know people who don't want to have kids, and I don't mean that. You asked me about my own answer to the question. That's my own answer.
Yes.
I'm really happy with my friends who've chosen their life not having kids. I do not mean to be. I'm feeling
just
like I'm
to make
hear
sure.
a lot about this.
Just to make sure we leave that point clear.
But in my world, yeah, that's the difference I'll make in this world. If we can build a radio network for local media that has an impact going forward, I'll be proud of that. But that impact will come from the people who are creating the programming.
Yeah.
My impact will come from 2 exceptional, strong, intelligent, empathetic, driven young women who are going to grow into women like the ones who are standing around me right now. And I win.
That's such a beautiful thing to say. I know they're gonna smile when they hear this interview.
They're going to go, oh, Dad, oh, you're so cheesy.
Well, Alex, to finish with an exceptionally cheesy question.
Good. All right. And I'll try to
Thank you
answer
so
honestly
much.
as always.
Of course, please. We love to see how you actually respond this questions, like really as the way you are.
Okay.
That is the best thing. So you know that our podcast, it's called Beyond Us, right? Because we believe that people are much more than what meets the eye. So I would love to ask, what is something about Alex Freedman that the world doesn't immediately see, but that has been essential in shaping who you are?
I do not have the confidence that I portray. I'm always questioning myself and my decisions. And I don't let that out. When I'm leading a team, I have to make my decisions, make them rationally. I think I'm always afraid of making the wrong decision. And I don't know that I do it right every time. The inside me questions myself. And I live with it every day. I have to put on a brave face. I have to be that leader. When I'm speaking in front of a conference, I have to be strong in my convictions. I'm not always sure about it.
How do you do it to portray that?
Reason, compassion. I do my best. And in those moments when I am wrong, and it happens more often than I'd like to admit, I admit it. I acknowledge it. I'm not perfect.
We're humans.
We're humans. If we make a decision in the not-for-profit I run, if I make a decision in my company that I run, and it's the wrong one, if I say something to my daughters and they call me out on it and they say, you can't tell me to show me your homework, it's a personal thing. But I want to see the homework. I have to admit, and I have to have the humility to say to them, I'm sorry. I was wrong. And I'll do better. And that applies to everything I do. So that's how I get through it. I'm aware that I'm not perfect. And in those moments when it is shown to me that I've done something wrong, I'll be the first person to acknowledge that. And that helps me get through it. And it helps me say that I now have enough experience, laps around the block, 51 years looking at you.
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, you better not. To say that based on all of that experience, I'm pretty confident that this is the right way to go. I think very clearly that this is the way we need to operate in this world.
It's not easy, though, to
It isn't.
leave pride behind. And
it doesn't, that's maybe something that my 21-year-old self wouldn't have known. But enough bruises over time and enough moments where I sit down and I go, God, I was wrong. That's a perspective I hadn't thought of. Thank you.
No, thank you, Alex, for being here. And I think I'm speaking for all the listeners of this podcast. You have this whole new perspective about how should we really engage in making things better, to have a better future, to be better with the people around us, to try our best despite not being perfect, which because it's a reality. We're not perfect, and it's okay to embrace it. But I wonder if you have a specific message for all the people that's listening to you, for their future, for their career, or maybe if they want to delve into media and try to do a difference, try to make a difference, but they don't know if they will actually, what was that? If they would actually create that difference.
You said I can swear, right?
Yes.
Give a fuck.
Okay.
Like, and I'm not kidding about this. Care enough to stand up and do something. In whatever your way it is. If you see a problem, give a fuck enough to stand up and say, there's a problem here. And here's my opinion about that. You know, like if you think, hey, there's a role in student government that I could really, make a difference.
Yes.
Give a fuck enough to go out and do it. If there's a problem in your neighborhood and you see an elderly person who needs help, give a fuck enough to introduce yourself and say, I've got some solutions. Can I be there? Like, what the worst thing, in my opinion, one of the worst things, in my opinion, is people who don't put their hand up when they can.
Out of fear, maybe.
Out of fear, out of ignorance, out of peer pressure. There's a million reasons why people don't do it. And that's why I'm really direct about what I say here. Give a fuck. Because that's on you. That's something you can control.
It is actually something we can control.
Yeah.
So, Alex, thank you so much for being here. We loved having you here, your whole perspective. I don't know, look at the smiles of everyone in the room. I think your company really meant a lot to us. And I'm sure that the listeners are going to love this interview and to get to know you.
Well, thank you for the questions. You've challenged me with the questions. Thank you for caring enough to ask. Thank you for giving a fuck about what makes people tick.
We give a fuck.
I know. I feel it all over the place. And thank you for where you're going and what you're going to be. I don't know what it is, and I don't think you do, but it'll be something. And you're going to make a difference. And I'm proud to know you. And I'm proud to be in this room.
Thank you for being our inspiration, Alex. And thank you guys for being here with us in Beyond Us, our first episode of the English content. We'll see you